Welcome, everyone. Welcome back to Pursuing Justice. We have had a wonderful series of programs featuring our guest who is with us again today, Ken Hartman. We're talking about life without parole, and that's a sentence that Ken received a long, long time ago. But he was able to gain his freedom thanks to Governor Jerry Brown of California. And Ken will be out almost 3 years this December. So we are now talking about what life has been like for him outside of prison. And we spoke to his daughter last week. So I encourage people to listen from the beginning so you get the flow of our podcast this month. So, Ken, welcome back to Pursuing Justice.
Well, it's great to be back, Harriet. Thank you.
All right. We enjoyed speaking with your daughter about what it was like for her for so very many years as she visited you in prison, and what it's been like for her now that you're out of prison. So what has life been like for you since you walked out, and what was the exact date of your release?
Right. Well, I got out on December 20th, 2017. If I remember correctly, it was a Wednesday. It was, up in the high desert of northern Los Angeles County, so it was a little bit cold. It's not like the rest of LA County. It's kind of like it snows up there and it's windy, and
Wow.
Yeah, it's although not a tremendous amount, but it does snow occasionally. It's a high desert, it does get pretty cold at night.
Yeah.
But a friend of mine came and picked me up, and it would to say, I mean, the words sort of almost escape me, but surreal, amazing, overwhelming. There were elements of sadness, there were elements of grief, there were elements of just absolute sheer joy. It was a really, astonishing day. I've actually written a thing about it that I probably will publish sooner or later, and it's about 8,000 words about that one day.
Oh,
so
it was
a powerful experience. It really was.
I would think so. And in terms of your thoughts about that day, did you ever imagine that a day like that would come?
No, I really didn't. And in fact, and I say this not like just in I say this not in some metaphorical way, but like literally, right up to the minute I was walking out the front gate of the prison, I was certain someone was going to go, wait a minute, you're not supposed to be getting out. I mean, there was this part of me that kept saying that this is not really happening. This is a mistake of some kind. There's no way this is going to happen. That voice was getting quieter and quieter as I got closer and closer to the gate. And I saw my friend Linda standing there, ready to, the big smile on her face, ready to hug me and, and all that. But I did not believe that I ever would, Harriet. I've explained this to people a few different ways, but I think the best way to explain it is I gave up that hope, and giving up that hope was not an easy thing. It was a very painful thing to do. And that part of me that was afraid of having that kind of hope was not letting me feel that right up to the moment I was getting out. It was like, that was impossible. It can't happen. Nevertheless it did.
Very understandable. And how did that come about, that a life sentence is a life sentence not only in California, but in every state here in the United States? So how did it happen that your sentence was commuted by Governor Brown?
Well, basically a few years before that, some activists that I were friends with said to me, you really should file for a commutation of your sentence, which is a technical procedure where the governor can commute your sentence, can pardon you, all these other things. And every governor in every state in this country, I believe, has that power to one degree or another. And it was always there. But of course, no one sentence had been commuted serving life without parole who came in as an adult. There had been a few people who had come in as juveniles whose sentences were commuted, but no one who had been an adult had in like more than 25 years. So it seemed completely like there's no possible way that could ever happen. But I did file the commutation because I thought, well, what have I got to lose? But I never had any faith that it would actually occur until it did. It was actually on Good Friday in April of 2017 is when my sentence was actually commuted.
And why such a large span of time between, that would be around April, I would guess, and then didn't leave till December?
Right, because what the governor did and what they have since done in California, because they've now commuted about 147 people who had life without parole to life with parole. He did not pardon me. He did not order me released that day. He just basically resentenced me to a standard life with parole sentence. Oh. And in California, with a life with parole sentence, you go to the board and all that sort of stuff. And a very small percentage of people who go to the board are found suitable for parole and are let out.
I see.
So I had to go to the board like everybody else.
So only 140 people against how many would that got life without parole?
There are 5,200 plus or minus a few currently in California serving life without the possibility of parole. So you're looking at I don't know, what would that be? A couple of percent or something.
Tiny, very, very, very small.
Very, very, very tiny amount. Exactly. Yeah.
And why do you think that you were approved for release?
That is like the hardest question for me to possibly answer. I say this completely honestly. There are moments when I haven't the foggiest idea how that could have happened. I was a giant pain in their ass for many, many years. As I told you, I think a couple of weeks ago, I was in the hole 9 times for political activities against them. And I don't know the answer to that. I really don't. I'm not being coy. I really don't know. Only thing I can say is I had made a lot of friends who among the prison activist community who respected the work that I had done from inside. And I would assume people spoke up for me when the time came to think about who was either going to be considered. Ultimately, 5 people's names were submitted to the governor from the Department of Corrections to be considered. He picked 3 of them, and one of those 3 was me.
Oh, boy. Very, very slim chance, right? Yeah.
Extraordinarily slim chance. It literally was like winning the lottery. It really was.
That's right.
Yeah.
Now maybe it was a good thing between, say, April and December, because, how could it be that they would turn around and say, okay, you're out? Did you feel that time was important to prepare for your eventual release?
Yeah, to be honest with you, looking back on it, I think the answer to that is probably yes, because you're absolutely right. I mean, I was wholly unprepared, in any material way. I think I had done the work of transformation where I was not an unsafe person to release by any stretch. But and I want to say there are tens of thousands of other folks who are equally safe to release. Certainly was not the only person. But I used that time to come up with some plans and make connections and write to a lot of my friends and say, hey, I'm getting out and, this or that, jobs. And a friend of mine started putting money together so I would be able to purchase a car. So I had like a wide support network that stepped up that were all like, wow, you're really getting out. Can't believe that. I was like, I'm not either, but it looks like I am. So I created kind of like a safety net before I got out. So I was very lucky to be able to do that. And yeah, that time was actually useful. It didn't feel like it at the time, to be frank, Harriet. Those months were the longest time I ever did.
I bet. So, yeah, very slow moving, I'm sure, right?
Really, really slow moving, yes.
Yeah. Were there very specific things that you did to prepare for reentry? I mean, like, where were you going to live? How were you going to support yourself? How did you handle on those things the parole board always wants to know anyway?
Right.
How did you put those together?
Well, so what I did is I was luckily was in contact with many organizations that do that kind of work,
Oh, okay.
work that I do now, and was able to reach out to them and say, hey, I'm getting out, possibly getting out, and I thought it would actually have been actually somewhat later than December. I assumed that the earliest would have been in February,
Hmm.
but I said I could be getting out at the end of this year. And I'm going to need to go to what they call a transition house. You can't really just, as a lifer, you generally can't just parole home. And of
Hmm.
course, I didn't really have a home to go to, to be
Sure.
real about it. And, I had no real family connections about it at all. But, so I was able to reach out to some places and make get some commitments from different organizations in Los Angeles County that were willing to take me in as a transitional person. And I went to a place, was called a sober living home in what's called the University Heights area of Los Angeles. And I spent my first 5 months out living there.
Oh.
And I went from there to a friend's place up in Lancaster, who had converted his garage into a little studio apartment that he was going to be using for a Airbnb. And he said to me, he said, look, we've been friends for a long time. You can stay here as long as you want, rent free. So I was very, very lucky. I had a
Oh boy.
tremendous amount of support. I was able to land pretty solidly on both feet. And I was working 2 weeks after I got out. I was already working. So I had all of the advantages of building a strong network of support over many, many years without ever realizing that it would be for that. I just
That's
did it
right.
because I like to have friends, frankly,
That's
so, I
right.
mean, that's, yeah,
Terrific. Now, you said you were working 2 weeks after you got out. What were you doing?
I was hired as a grant proposal writer and development coordinator for a nonprofit in Los Angeles called Jail Guitar Doors. They do rehabilitative work inside the prison system using music as sort of the method of rehabilitation. And I had become very good friends with the executive director of that program many years before I got out. And when I told him I was getting out, he said, "You want to come to work for us?" And I was like, "Sure." So I started working for them like 2 weeks after I was out. And 2 weeks after that, I went to work for a second organization that also did reentry and in-prison program work. So I was working for two places within a month.
Oh, that doesn't happen. That's pretty rare, I think. Now,
I,
what work are you involved with right now? Is it the same as you were doing when you got out, or something different?
in many ways, it's the same, but not with the same people necessarily. But basically, I'm involved with. Right now, I just recently moved into a new position where I'm the advocacy coordinator for the transformative in prison work group. It's a really long, sort of cumbersome name, but we just call it the TPW. And I am involved with advocating on behalf of about 50 organizations in California, community-based organizations that provide rehabilitative, transformative, trauma-informed work inside the California prisons. I'm involved with advocating for more programs, more funding, trying to make things work better and get more people involved. I'm also involved with development work with that organization. I still do grant proposal writing for a variety of organizations on a contract basis. I mean, that was sort of like I was doing grant proposal writing while I was in prison. So I already had like a very marketable skill before I got out. That was the thing that gave me the biggest boost as far as, that goes. I had a job that people wanted to hire me for before I got out.
Right. How did you